Here's the story. So as you guys know, my health issues really started a long time ago. When I was in high school, I had stomach issues for as long as I can remember, and my sophomore year, I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. My thyroid had went totally crazy, and at the same time, I had came to my mom one night and told her that when I was breathing, as you can tell right now, I'm like, oh, my breathing's really heavy. I think my thyroid's a little out of whack right now, but long story short, I went into congestive heart failure as well. My thyroid was so out of whack, and I was in the first stages of congestive heart failure. And they got my thyroid leveled. The dogs are chasing each other around the house. So they got my thyroid leveled and didn't have issues again up until they found out. Sorry, I hope you can hear me. Well, when they found out that I had Hashimoto's. So, oh my gosh, they are so loud. They're totally distracting me. So that ties in once I get further down the road. But after I had Reagan and I got into Beachbody and kind of getting healthy, I started noticing that I was becoming intolerant to foods. So it started with wheat and gluten, and that was in 2014, and they tested me for celiac based on antibodies, and I didn't have the antibodies, but I had already cut out gluten. So they tested genetics, and I had the genetics for celiac. So based on my symptoms and that I had the genetics for celiac, I was just labeled a celiac and told to not even breathe in gluten. And then, so went gluten-free, and along the way, I started to, probably about 3 years ago, I started to react to coconut oil. And it was really bad. The next day after ingesting coconut oil, I'd have all kinds of stomach issues, migraines, and I would be in this deep depression. Let me see if I can move this so that I don't look like a ghost. I'd be in this like deep depression, and it was kind of then that I started connecting foods with my depression. And at the time, like I said, it was just coconut oil and gluten. And then it started spiraling. Teas, I was reacting to teas, and they were giving me awful stomach aches and nausea, and I always felt like I had the flu. I had the chills, and my stomach was churning. And a few times a month, my mom always said, you know, you always have the stomach flu. What's going on? And none of us could figure it out. And sorry, I should probably make it so I can't see comments because I'm like so distracted. Anyways, and I could never connect them. Like, why did I react to every single tea? I would drink iced tea and react. I would drink herbal tea and react. There was never a common kind of theme. And then probably I started reacting to things like lunch meat, and I could eat pork just fine, and then all of a sudden I started reacting to pork. I couldn't have pork at all. And it kind of started spiraling. Banana, all kinds of fruits, to where I got down to where chicken and rice, in fact rice I did start to react to, any type of grain, but chicken was really the only thing I could eat and feel good about, knowing that I would not feel sick to my stomach the next day. So I got to where I wouldn't eat at all day until dinner time, and then I would eat what was somewhat safe, but not to where I'd feel nauseous, and I would eat a ton to get me through the whole day because I knew I could sleep most of it off. Hey Brandy. And it was just not fun and not a good way to live life. The doctors kept telling me, your quality of life isn't great. And I'd sit in their office and I'd sob and say, I know, like I want to be able to go to the pool with my kids and not have to plan it, because I would have to plan it because the chemicals in the pool or even the hot springs would make me to where I'd feel just zapped for energy for 2 days after taking my kids to the pool, or being you guys have seen I like to craft, so I'd spray paint something and I'd be sick for days afterwards. So it wasn't just food reactions, it was environmental reactions. And so it was always planning. If I wanted to do anything outside of my house, I had to plan around being sick for 2 days afterwards. And I got myself a Vog mask, which basically like sorts any type of smells or anything coming in, and I'd wear it around my house because everything was making me feel sick. So I started kind of digging into things. I got to where my skin was cracking. It still kind of is, because even the most allergy safe lotions would make me react. And I say react, not like an allergy reaction. I wasn't anaphylactic. It was very much a depression thing. It would send me into depression. It would send me into feeling like I had the flu for days, and just feeling, when I say depression, I have kind of talked about this before, when I say like it's a numbing depression. It's one of those, you're down in the hole and you remember, like you want to remember what emotions feel like, but you can't even think about what being happy feels like. It's like scary. It's very scary, because you know that it's not the normal way to feel, and you know that it's food that made you feel this way. So I just tell myself, like, hang on for a few days, flush this out of your system. Sure enough, a few days later, it's flushed out of my system. And that's when I started to really realize, like, this is not normal and there's something really weird going on. But like I said, doctors would tell me, this is no quality of life. But I could tell that they were all looking at me thinking, you're, excuse my language, batshit crazy. Like, there is something seriously wrong in your head. And I'd even tell them, I say, I know I sound crazy, but there's something wrong. So I went to my allergist and I said, will you test me for mast cell? Because I had been digging into things, and the only connection I could make with all these reactions was histamine. They all were high in histamine. The fruits, the leftovers, I'd have to freeze anything I ate. So say we had dinner, I'd freeze leftovers so that I could eat them again, because if they sat in the fridge, the histamine builds, and I'd react to them even if I didn't react to them when I first ate them. Does that make sense? I know it sounds crazy. So I was digging and digging, and I kind of, they were testing my adrenals, and those were shot, and my hormones were shot. They told me I had the hormones of a 50-year-old, but nothing was making me feel better. I got diagnosed with, ADHD. I was put on bioidentical hormones, and nothing quite did the trick, I guess. And I kind of knew it was also bad when I would eat certain foods and my ADHD medication wouldn't work the next day. Like, it was so bad that even that medication wouldn't help. So from the start, my primary care physician was saying, I really think this is what you have. And because I said the histamine, and if you guys have seen some of my photos, I was reacting to, it's called skin writing, dermatographism, I think is what it's called. But you'd scratch my arm and it'd welt up wherever it scratched. So I'd go into stores and carry a basket, and I'd break out in hives. And I just looked like I constantly had a bear that clawed at me on my stomach. And I'd open a box and the box would touch me, and I'd just start itching all over. And I kept telling her, like, no, that's not it. I've looked into that, and it's not that bad. Like, what I see isn't that bad. Like, I'm down to like 2 foods I can eat. Like, it has to be far more serious than that. So I kept going around her, kind of, and went to, so the allergist that tested me for mast cell, everything came back normal, which, if you know much about mast cell activation syndrome, you know that most of the time it does, and that's why it's so hard to get people to take you seriously, because your blood work, or not your blood work, your urine samples, your histamine levels, that stuff come back normal, because you have to be like in a reaction. So I could tell he was like, kind of put me to the side, but he told me that if it came back, that was the case, that he would refer me over to National Jewish. So I am a very big believer on, yeah, it's bad, Darcy. you got to listen to this because I have a feeling you're going to be like, whoa. Because I know so many of my friends that this is going to be their issue because it's just crazy. So I took it into my own hands. I was like, I'm not waiting. I know you guys think I'm crazy. So I called National Jewish and I made an appointment myself. And I saw the allergist there and I left in tears. First of all, while I was over there to see her, we got a call from the principal at Riker School saying that Riker had gotten aggressive that day at school and was in the principal's office, and he'd never been in the principal's office before. So I was like already an emotional mess. I'm over in Denver, my son's in the principal's office, and this isn't like him. And so I'm sobbing to the doctor about my son while I'm at my appointment. And once again, I could just tell that she was looking at me like, you're crazy. She asked me, she said, does Benadryl help? And I said, yeah, it does, but not always. Sometimes it's so bad that it doesn't help. So she ran a bunch of tests, and I came back with a few elevated things, nothing crazy, nothing that they look at and go, oh, this is what's wrong with her. My immunoglobulin, my IgE, would come back high if I were reacting to something allergy-wise, and instead it came back insanely low, which says that I have no environmental allergens. I have no allergy to anything in the environment, which is crazy because my skin testing shows I have severe allergies to so many environmental things, pretty much all grass, weeds, trees. Hi! Okay, so she knows some of my stories, so this is gonna sound familiar. Jennifer. So she said, I really think it's in your stomach, and I'm gonna refer you to the GI department. So in the meantime, I was looking up reviews on these doctors, and there was one that had really good reviews, and I'm like, man, I hope I get with him. And they called and they put me with that doctor, but my appointment was 3 months out. So I waited longer and just kind of like living on a little bit of hope and white knuckling it, as Alicia would say, kind of hoping that somebody was gonna figure it out. And I go over there and I said, so a few years ago I was treated for H. pylori, I forget how to say it. And he asked if it helped, and I said no. And I said, but my primary, she really thinks this is what's going on. And he said, first of all, I don't know why you haven't seen a gastro sooner, since I've had stomach issues pretty much my whole life. And he said, we're gonna scope you top to bottom. I was scoped from the top, I was scoped from the bottom. Had to be back to Denver 2 weeks later. And the really weird thing happened when I was scoped. I couldn't eat, so I went over and I did a breath test before I was scoped. So for the breath test, 24 hours before, you can only eat chicken and rice, and then you have to have 12 hours of only water. And then from there, I had to have another 24 hours of prepping for the scopes. So I was like, nothing. I had nothing in my system. And for the first time, I felt good. Like, I was like, this is weird. Like, I have a pounding migraine, but other than that, I feel good. My stomach's not hurting. You know, I can actually suck my stomach in without getting pain. And I've had blood sugar issues since I was 4 or 5. When I was little, I used to tell my mom I was shaky. And so she'd feed me, get my blood sugar up. And for the first time, my blood sugar wasn't dropping. I was terrified of not eating that long because I thought my blood sugar would surely tank, and it didn't. So it was reacting to foods, my blood sugar was. So the scopes came back. It showed that I had, my bottom scope was totally fine. My top one came back and showed that I had this nodule in my GI junction, I think is what it's called. And so that was terrifying because they give you these pictures, but they don't tell you what's wrong because they send it off to pathology to find out if it's cancerous or not. So I had weeks, okay, not weeks, I had a week to Google all these things that were wrong with me and all these things I was dying of because of these dang pictures they gave me. And those were the pictures that Riker thought I swallowed Tide Pods because it does look like Tide Pods in my throat. came back that I just had a lot of irritation, and they told me I probably had GERD, acid reflux. So the week before I went in, I'd gotten one of my flu-like episodes, and I was throwing up bile. So I figured, yeah, you know, it's weird, but yeah, I guess that could be it. I know, never Google. But another weird thing is during these times when I'd feel really flu-like, I also had developed a new symptom. I was breaking out. You know, I had acne in high school and stuff, and then I just had your normal stuff until these episodes started coming on, and I was getting really bad cystic acne, like on my neck of all places, not on my face, on my neck. And it was just weird because it would always come on when I'd feel like I had the flu. Oh, the really crazy thing too, they took a biopsy when they were doing the scope, came back that I was negative for celiac. So I'd spent years being gluten-free, and so that left me with the question of, why does gluten make me so dang sick if I am not a celiac? So then my breath test came back. And the breath test was for something called SIBO. Now, many of you have probably heard of this, but probably don't know how bad it can be. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And they test for methane and hydrogen producing bacteria. A positive is a spike of 12, I believe, and my combined spike was 168. So I was bad. And this is what my doctor had been telling me it sounded like I had all along. And so I was like, okay, I better really start digging into it. So I started digging into it, and I started to get to some things that said OCD-like tendencies, ADHD, deep depression, and I was like, whoa, all these doctors are telling me that depression cannot be a side effect of me ingesting certain foods when it says right here, it causes deep depression. And so the more I started digging into it, I don't know if you guys remember, but Riker and I flew down to Arizona in November to see a Pandas clinic, which stands for pediatric. Basically, it was that he was reacting to things like strep and stuff in a different way. His brain was attacking the wrong things, and it would bring on OCD, and it would bring on aggression when he was sick. So we'd treat with anti-inflammatories 3 times a day when he was sick, and it would bring his behavior down. So we've always said Riker and I are identical. We went through, I was his same age when I did OCD hand washing, about 4 when he did it. I had the same mouth tick he had at his age. Just really, really weird things. Hey, Mandy. And so I'm like, oh, this is weird. This is really weird. Like, this sounds just like pandas, and this sounds like pans. And so I'm like, I wonder. So I start going crazy. I mean, I've been researching for years. Why not this? I felt like I was finally linking something. And I type in pandas and SIBO. And I come to a guy that he's a little crazy. He's kind of one of those guys you'd call a quack, but he just fascinates me. And he had posted a blog on how he believed, like how you're born with the strain of strep in your gut. And it's a different strain than we know of, but he calls SIBO being strepped out. And basically your body's overridden with strep. It causes acne, it causes hormonal imbalances. He thinks that it actually triggers Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease. My mom's an autoimmune diabetic. So super fascinating. And I actually screenshot the text because I was gonna show them to you guys, but they're on my phone and I'm filming with my phone. But I was like real time sending to my mom and my sister going, holy crap, excuse my language. I was like, shit, like, oh my God, I finally made this connection. I went flying over to my mom's after dinner and I was like, you gotta read this article. So then I decide, okay, I am starting Riker on SIBO treatment. You know, the worst it can do is nothing happens. The best it can do, we figure out the root cause of all this. So I Google SIBO protocol for child because he's young. The antibiotics they put me on for 2 weeks, they usually don't do them until age 10 or 12. And the first article that pops up, now I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, and there's gonna be some harsh feedback towards me, and I'm okay with that because I would have had some harsh reactions to it a year ago. I would have thought I was batshit crazy a year ago if I was watching this. So the first article that pops up is called Reversing Autism. And my sister and I have always said that we feel like I have Asperger's. I hate making eye contact with people. I hate talking to people. The psychiatrist had diagnosed me as having social phobia. Carly, yeah, this is amazing. So I start digging into this guy's blog on reversing autism, and he talks about when you are born, you take on your mother's gut bacteria. So you basically can be born with SIBO. And you can be born with a decent amount of good bacteria and bad bacteria, and you can have certain genetics that trigger it. For us, we have, in our genetics, we have some very rare gene mutation that causes adverse reactions to vaccines. We did not know about it until I took the 23andMe testing. We also have all kinds of mutations in our cytokines. Is that how you say it? Cytokine? Yeah. Anyways, that cause inflammation. So we're kind of like the perfect storm brewing. And so I believe I was born with it. I believe Riker, unfortunately, was born with it. Reagan, my sisters, my mom, because we probably inherited it from my mom. This guy actually calls it the broken mommy syndrome because some people, their gut bacteria doesn't get messed up until they are pregnant. Anyways, the really, really, really fascinating thing about this is the reason he calls it reversing autism. He says he never set out to cure autism. Now, if you know that this isn't just me speaking, flying with the wind, my niece was diagnosed with autism when she was young. This isn't something that I have no knowledge of. This is something that, like I said, truly fascinates me. And I know it probably sounds crazy to everyone else, but this bacteria puts off something called, starts with a P, acid, when it's fed. And lo and behold, it is a numbing acid. It numbs your emotions, it numbs your body, and you go into this autistic-like state. And I was like, oh my God, that's literally the feeling I just posted about. That's the feeling that I get where I feel like I can't feel emotion at all. I know I have it in me, but like I can't even remember what emotions feel like. And it's after I've eaten these things. So he calls it kind of going into that catatonic state. Like this food is causing this bacteria to release this acid, and it just numbs everything. And the reason he calls it reversing autism is because he has this protocol that puts your body back into a state where you're allowing the inflammation to calm, which is just like we do with Riker with pandas and pans. And you're allowing your brain to, they call it the awakening, where you start to feel again. And we started Riker on the protocol, and it was the craziest thing because they say they go back to missed milestones. So about a week in, he started chewing on his paper. He was doing homework and all of a sudden just stuffed it in his mouth and was chewing on it. And he loves to draw, but he's not a scribbler. He took his homework, literally started just scribbling like you would see a small child doing. And I'm just sitting there like, what in God's name? What is this? So it was just so fascinating to me. But here's another thing I'm sure I'm gonna get, and I've been hesitant on whether or not to say anything on this because I do coach with Beachbody, and I was a big believer in probiotics, but this guy has you remove all probiotics because he calls them the birds and the fish. And he says probiotics are adding lizards to the mix. My dad started having SIBO-like symptoms after he started probiotics, and it's because you're basically adding to something that wasn't there, and it can actually, taking in probiotics can actually cause SIBO. I know, the world is huge on probiotics, everybody believes in them, but if you look into top researchers, they actually say probiotics are actually bad for you, and we shouldn't be taking them. So we have stopped all probiotics. We will never take them again. And we are doing, this guy's name is Dr. Nemchek, and he is who we are going to see in Arizona. When I brought up me going into congestive heart failure and my thyroid, yeah, probiotics make me so sick too, and nobody ever believed me when I said that. In fact, I actually got a prenatal that was a probiotic on accident, and I felt like death for 2 days. So he uses something called a vagus nerve stimulator as well, and ironically that vagus nerve is what controls, they use it in congestive heart failure patients, and your thyroid's linked and everything's linked to it. So he does that with adults and kids. It's something so simple, and what I love about him is he's not trying to make money off this. He says, kids, you can find the protocol in the book, you don't need to go see him, but whereas I feel like I'm a complicated case and I'm an adult and I would love to have the vagus nerve stimulator, we are going down to him because he says it's a circle. You have SIBO and you have your, I probably should have looked this stuff up before going live, autonomic system. So things like POTS, the people that have POTS is very well connected to mast cell. So the blood pressure issues where you just drop and you faint, these are all connected to the system, and you can't cure one without curing the other. So you're gonna always go back to SIBO if you're not getting that system in check, and he teaches you how to do that. And his work is just fascinating. I feel like he's answered every single question I've ever had, every question my sisters, my mom, and I have ever, we've cried to each other so many times saying, can somebody just take in our whole family? Maybe they can figure us all out if we all go in together. You know, my niece has anaphylactic allergies to so many things, far more than any child should ever have. And he just answered it all. Why it's in our family, why we got it from my mom. Yeah, Jess, you gotta check this out because I know we have a lot of the same stomach issues. Mandy, I remember it because I'm fascinated, and I just, I seriously could not sleep. I was so excited because I felt like I was crazy for so many years, and he answered it all. So I was on, okay, so my antibiotics, pregnancy, everything. So I was on strong antibiotics. I was on, it's called rifaximin, and neomycin is the combination for both methane and hydrogen. Yes, I will post his name. He has a book on Amazon called The Nemchek Protocol, and he has a website on it. He actually was a top researcher for AIDS, and he found that when he was curing this, he accidentally stumbled into the autism world, into the ADHD world. It wasn't something he set out to do, which I just could watch his videos forever. There are groups on it. The groups have been blowing up lately, so if you want that information, send me a message. I don't want to post it publicly because I don't want to blow them up further. So I was on these strong antibiotics for 2 weeks, and before I was on the strong antibiotics, I just couldn't wait. Once I realized this is exactly what my whole life had revolved around and what was wrong, I found an herbal protocol that worked like antibiotics. And the GI that I was seeing was out of the office for a week, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start on the herbals until the GI's in to prescribe this. So I started myself on the herbals, and I felt so amazing. We started Riker on the herbals, and that's what we started seeing the awakening in him. I felt so good, like Matt actually said, I actually don't want to go back to work for once, because he'd come home and I would just hate everything. I would be so grumpy, and it was just a very not good state, knowing that, you know, I couldn't eat anything and I didn't want to cook for my kids because I couldn't feed them anything. And so the herbals are oil of oregano and berberine, and I can show you guys that information. And SIBO is so hard to treat. So most doctors, even regular run-of-the-mill doctors that aren't into herbals and stuff, will have you do the antibiotics for 2 weeks and then do a round of herbals, because it will hopefully get what the antibiotics didn't, because like I said, it's so hard to treat most people. I was sobbing because I was in the SIBO group and seeing people, the relapse rate is like 90% within the first year. These people had to eat low FODMAP for the rest of their lives, and if they ate one thing off, they relapsed with SIBO. And I was like, I've been living years like this. I don't want to go back to that. And there has to be some other way. Now I know why, is because step 2 is to add back in probiotics. So they're just triggering SIBO again. Or at least that's what I hope, because I'm still having really good success. So I was on the herbals, and then I called my primary and I was like, okay, I'm not worthy. You were right, I'll eat crow. Will you please prescribe this for me, because my GI is not in? And she prescribed, and she has been so amazing with giving me everything I've asked for and helping me out. And so I was feeling amazing on these herbals, and I was on a week of them. And like, sorry, I hope this isn't too much TMI, like had my libido back, which is something I hadn't had in a long time. And I had my energy back. I just felt so happy, like my emotions were no longer numbed, and I felt so good. My dad started on it, and my dad was like, oh my gosh, this stuff is... I'm gonna wait and let everybody jump back on, because there were like 40 people watching, and my phone died. Sorry. I have it plugged into the charger, so hopefully it stays. We'll see. Guess we'll see how good this charger is. Okay, I'm just gonna give it a tiny bit longer, because it was just getting good. I was just getting to the meat. Hi. Thanks for letting me know you guys are all here. Okay, the number's getting back up there. Okay, we only have half the people, but I'll just continue on. Okay, so my dad started on SIBO, the protocol, the herbals, and he was like, this is amazing, I have no more bloat, because he had so many stomach issues. Ironically, after I convinced him to try probiotics, he said his stomach had never been the same. And Aunt Frog, if you're watching, he said Uncle Randy had said the same thing, so you might want to try these. So my fault, sorry guys. And so he took it for 2 weeks and has been fine, but he wants to continue to take one a day for the rest. Anyway, so I was on a week of the herbals, felt amazing, finally got my antibiotics called in, started on the antibiotics, and a few days into the antibiotics, I was like, dang, like, these are like tenfold the herbals. I feel like such crap. Like, I feel like I got hit by a Mack truck, something's going on. I am currently not taking anything, except for the protocol. I am taking the protocol, which involves EVU, so extra virgin olive oil. It has to be sealed with the California state stamp. I can show you exactly what it is in a second. I can grab everything. Fish oil, which has been really hard for me because of histamine. It is huge on histamine, even though I'm not reacting to foods anymore. I'm still reacting to topical stuff, and that can take months to fix. So I am starting on like a low kids dose, and even still, it still affects my mood pretty bad. And Reagan, every time I give her fish oil, breaks out in a really bad rash around the mouth. So we are really waiting to see Dr. Name Check and see kind of how we can fix this without going too crazy, since we're reacting to lowest doses. Yeah, it's super crazy. Crystal, if you missed everything, I started a video. Hi, Lily! Started a video before. I was like half hour in and my phone died, so I'm starting it back up. You can go back. So no, I did not take birth control, because if you guys know my background with my fertility, we have had 5 miscarriages. I had a miscarriage before Riker, and then I had Riker, and we had 4 miscarriages while trying for Reagan. found out that my progesterone was low. Goes hand in hand with what my primary said, that I have the hormones of a 50-year-old woman. And I had to take progesterone every time after I ovulated, and I still miscarried. We had a fertility specialist, and it took the right combination of progesterone. And then after the first trimester, I'd come off the progesterone, and I started to spot with Reagan, and my cervix started to shorten, so I was on weekly shots of progesterone until I was term with her. So, yeah, a few days into the actual antibiotics, feeling like crap, and all of a sudden I was like, man, every time I even drink water, I feel sick, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I get hyperemesis gravidarum with my kids, which is extreme sickness. I puke from the time I get really nauseous right off the bat before I even get positive tests. And then I puke from the time I'm 6 weeks until I deliver. And I have really harsh deliveries. I get tachycardia and I fever, and it's a hot mess. That's why they've told me not to have any more kids. Anyways, so I took a test and I about fell on the floor when I had a positive. We had not been using birth control because I knew that if I didn't have progesterone, my body wouldn't allow me to become pregnant. So, like, none of this should have happened. We shouldn't have been here. And it sounds horrible, but I called Matt sobbing, and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm pregnant. And he's like, what? I thought you couldn't get pregnant. And I'm like, me either. So 5.5 years of nothing, and all of a sudden I get my stomach fixed, and yeah. And here we are. So then, like I said, it sounds horrible, but I figured, okay, I don't have progesterone. I can't get into a doctor soon. Let's just see what my body does. 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So I call my primary, and I'm like, so I think I'm pregnant. I guess those herbals and the antibiotics, that maybe it was SIBO causing my infertility too. So would you be willing to order an HCG testing and an ultrasound? And she was amazing. She ordered both for me. My HCG came back 745 at 4 weeks, and I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, no progesterone, nothing, and things look good. And so then she ordered an ultrasound, and we went in. It was 5 weeks, 6 days, and they saw the yolk sac, but they couldn't see baby yet. So at that point, I called the OB, and they got me in, and he put me right on progesterone, gave me more Zofran, gave me another medication for nausea, and he said, well, let's see if we have a fetal pole. And if we have a fetal pole at the ultrasound, they tested my thyroid, then you'll come here for 10 weeks, and then after that, we'll release you to a high-risk specialist. So yesterday, I went in for my ultrasound, and she's like, well, it looks like you're actually measuring at 7 weeks with a due date of November 1st. And I'm still just kind of like laying there, like, how is this even possible? Like, what is going on? Matt and I we just laugh because we're like, you know, all along we kept saying, somebody's showing us signs, and then this happened, and we're like, okay, we hear you. We'll tell our story to everybody. Because obviously, like I said, my infertility was stemming from my stomach conditions, from bacterial overgrowth. And like I said, it causes hormonal issues. A lot of people think it even causes Hashimoto's and, as I said before, and autoimmune disorders, because your body knows it's overloaded in something but isn't quite sure what it's fighting, and so it starts fighting itself. Yeah, so here we are. We're 7 weeks pregnant and due in November. And I'm still just baffled by all this. Another really crazy thing is this doctor is down in Arizona also, and I'm like, why couldn't we have found you before we went to Tucson? We were literally 2 hours away, and they got us nowhere. They told us to put Riker on ibuprofen 3 times a day when he gets sick to calm inflammation. That's it. Riker's testing came back saying he didn't respond to any vaccines, basically, and he hadn't created antibodies, and it just was not worth it, and I really wish we'd found this doctor first. So then they send us over travel information, and they said, we really recommend you stay at this little community. We have these 2 rooms set up. And I look at the property management name and I'm like, oh my gosh. My business partner, Danielle, she works for, and her girls, for PV Bell, and that's who this apartment community is through that they're telling us to stay at. And I'm just like, man, somebody's really giving us signs left and right. And then baby is the final sign. So, like I said, when you look into SIBO online, it's like, oh, it's not that serious, it's not that much. But once you start really digging into things and really digging into people that fully understand it, you're like, whoa. Especially to where it runs in families, because the mother passes the gut bacteria onto the child. They inherit the mother's gut bacteria when they're born. It's just crazy, but not a lot of doctors know about it. The only place in Colorado that could actually do the breath test in person was in Denver. Otherwise, I had to do the test at home. They want to test Riker for it, but it's so hard to get a child to eat only chicken and rice for 24 hours and then nothing for 12 hours because you basically have to starve the bacteria to get it to react. So when I told Riker's doctor about this, he said he'd only ever heard of one other person that had SIBO, and they'd already had like 13 stomach surgeries by the time they'd been to him. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound good. But again, in my family, I have a cousin that had stomach surgery when they were little, and so it all just kind of falls in line. We've always said, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen to our family. Like, we have the weirdest crap happen to us, and now we know why. We all had inherited this awful stomach bacteria. When I wrote this doctor, I told him, I said, you've answered every question I've ever had, and even when I started reading into your stuff, I wondered, like, can you be born with this? And he wrote me back himself, and he said, you absolutely can be born with SIBO. As I said, my labors are horrible. We didn't figure out that it's just how my body does labor until after Reagan, when it happened for the 2nd time. But when I went into labor with Riker, I had tachycardia and a high fever, and I was throwing up, and so they thought I had an infection and that I had passed it on to Riker. So we both were kept after I had him. He was put into the NICU, and I was kept, and we were both put on antibiotics. If you've seen the pictures of him where he has an IV into his head, that's why he was on antibiotics immediately after birth, because they thought I had an infection, but in reality it's just how I labor, which can also trigger more stomach issues. So again, this isn't some naturopath thing, this isn't some herbal thing. If you look into it all across the board, even your normal doctors will put on herbals because this stuff is so hard to get rid of and so hard to treat. You have to do so many different things. But this particular doctor, he doesn't have you do diet restrictions, which I love, because I was like, I don't want to give up food, I just got it back. And it's not the way to live the rest of your life. So I really like that about him. It's so simple. It's things you can buy at the store. And he tells you, you can find the answer in the book. You don't need to travel here unless you're a case, and he'll write to you freely. Like, he'll write back and answer your questions. And so again, his name's Dr. Nemechek, and his book is called The Nemechek Protocol. And his blog is called Reversing Autism. I know that's highly controversial, me even saying that. And like I said, a year ago, I would have thought I was batshit crazy watching this, but it's definitely something to look into if you have similar issues to myself, or your kids have similar issues to my kids. You know, Reagan has all the sensory issues, and just makes so much sense to us. So the doctor's name is Nemechek. And if you just type in his name, it will pull up his blog, his website. It will probably pull up his book and the protocols. And he has YouTube. It took me a while to find his YouTube, but when I found his YouTube, it first gave me a YouTube video on him, and then it went into a YouTube on a mom named Kelsey, and she actually helps run the groups. And she had her teenage daughter on, and she posted videos of her daughter before and after the protocol, and all her balance being off and all these different things, and just showing the night and day difference. And I sent a text to my mom and I said, oh my God, you have to watch this. This mom talking is you and the daughter is me. Like, this daughter has all the exact same things I've been through. And sent the videos to my mom, and I think her blog is called The Mermaid Tales or something like that. But if you go to his YouTube, it will probably go into her videos. So thank you, Carly. Okay, I think that's all. I gave you guys an earful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. I'm happy to help anyone I can. Like I said, I don't benefit from this in any way. In fact, it probably hurts me more than anything because probiotics are a huge part of my income. But I wouldn't feel right with myself if I didn't put the whole full story out there and say exactly what's going on, because I feel like so many of my friends could benefit from this, and so many of my friends' children. So love you guys, and thanks for listening to my rambling. Again, like I said, feel free to message me if you need help, and I'll put the links down below on this and the other video since it was cut off and some people might not have seen this. Talk to you guys later. Bye.